Imagine a child who reads philosophy books while their classmates play video games, a teenager who asks profound questions that make adults uncomfortable, a young person who feels like they're speaking a different language than everyone around them. Now imagine that same person, 20 years later, sitting alone in their apartment, professionally successful but emotionally isolated, intellectually brilliant but struggling to form meaningful connections, surrounded by people who admire their mind but can't reach their heart. What if I told you this isn't coincidence? What if the very intelligence that makes someone special as a child becomes the prison that traps them as an adult? Today, we will uncover the psychological mechanisms that Carl Jung, one of history's most revolutionary thinkers, discovered about human development. We'll reveal why the smartest kids often become the loneliest adults, and more importantly, how to break free from this pattern. The final revelation will be the most powerful of all. It will change how you see intelligence, connection, and what it truly means to be human. You might think that being smart is always an advantage, that intelligence naturally leads to success and happiness. But Jung's analytical psychology tells a different story, a more disturbing truth. The terrifying reality is that gifted children often begin what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, decades before they're psychologically ready. While their peers are naturally absorbed in childhood games and social learning, smart kids start questioning everything: authority, social norms, the meaning of existence itself. Jung observed that individuation typically begins in midlife, around 35 to 40 years old, when people have established their place in society and are ready to explore deeper questions of meaning and authenticity. But highly intelligent children skip this natural timeline. They begin wrestling with existential questions at 8, 10, 12 years old. This premature awakening creates a fundamental disconnect. While other children are learning the basic social scripts, how to make friends, how to belong, how to navigate group dynamics, smart kids are already seeing through these conventions. They're asking, why do we have to pretend to like things we don't like, while their peers are simply learning to like what everyone else likes? The result? A child who feels like an alien in their own species. Someone who can understand complex philosophical concepts but can't figure out why their classmates care so much about seemingly trivial things. A young person who feels simultaneously superior and completely alone. But this is only the beginning. The real damage happens when these children try to solve their isolation problem, and the solution they choose becomes the trap that follows them into adulthood. Here's where Jung's concept of the persona reveals the most insidious mechanism at work. The persona is the mask we wear to fit into society, the version of ourselves we present to be accepted and successful. For most people, developing a persona is a natural, gradual process, but for gifted children, it becomes a desperate survival strategy. Smart kids face an impossible choice: be authentic and remain isolated, or create a false self that can connect with others. The problem is that highly intelligent children see through this choice in ways that other kids don't. They understand, sometimes consciously, that they're constructing a facade. This creates what Jung would recognize as a fundamental split in the psyche. The authentic self, curious, intense, questioning, gets pushed underground. The persona, the normal kid who can make small talk and care about popular things, takes over social interactions. But here's the cruel irony. The smarter the child, the better they become at constructing convincing personas. They study social interaction like a foreign language, learning to mimic emotions they don't feel and express interests they don't have. They become expert actors in the drama of normal life. The tragedy is that this mask works. They make friends, get invited to parties, achieve social success, but underneath they feel like frauds. They're constantly performing, never connecting. They're surrounded by people who like their persona but have never met their true self. And this pattern, established in childhood, becomes the template for all future relationships. The smart kid grows into an adult who can charm anyone but trust no one, who can succeed in any social situation but feels authentic in none. But there's an even darker force at work. one that Jung identified as the most dangerous aspect of the split psyche. What happens to all the parts of themselves that smart kids learn to hide? The emotional needs, the desire for simple pleasures, the longing to belong without having to earn it through performance. Jung discovered that these rejected aspects don't disappear. They form what he called the shadow. For gifted individuals, the shadow often contains the most basic human needs: the need for unconditional acceptance, the desire for emotional connection, the wish to be loved for who they are rather than what they can do. These needs get labeled as weakness or beneath them. Smart kids learn to be ashamed of their emotional needs. They tell themselves that needing others is weakness, that caring about acceptance is shallow, that wanting to fit in is selling out. They retreat into their intellectual fortress, using their intelligence as both shield and weapon. This creates a vicious cycle. The more they reject their emotional and social needs, the more these needs get projected onto others. They become hypercritical of people who seem needy, emotional, or concerned with social acceptance. They develop contempt for what they secretly crave most. Jung observed that what we cannot accept in ourselves, we see everywhere in others. The smart kid who has rejected their need for belonging becomes the teenager who judges their peers as sheep for caring about popularity. The gifted adult who has disowned their emotional needs becomes the person who can't tolerate weakness in others. But the shadow doesn't just create judgment, it creates unconscious sabotage. The rejected parts of the self don't remain passive. They actively undermine the very connections the person claims they don't need. Think about the brilliant person who gets close to someone and then finds ways to demonstrate their intellectual superiority, driving the other person away. Or the gifted individual who, when faced with genuine emotional intimacy, retreats into abstract discussions to avoid vulnerability. The shadow ensures that what we most need, authentic connection, becomes what we most fear and avoid. But there's another layer to this tragedy that Jung identified. Smart kids don't just feel disconnected from their peers, they feel disconnected from what Jung called the collective unconscious, the shared human experiences and archetypal patterns that bind communities together. While other children naturally participate in collective rituals, birthday parties, school traditions, shared cultural experiences, smart kids often stand apart as observers. They analyze these rituals instead of participating in them. They understand the psychology behind group bonding but can't access the simple joy of belonging. This creates a profound existential loneliness. It's not just that they can't connect with individuals, they feel like outsiders to the human experience itself. They become experts on humanity while feeling fundamentally inhuman. Jung believed that the collective unconscious contains archetypal patterns that provide meaning and belonging. But smart kids often get trapped in what Jung might call the outsider archetype, the hermit, the observer, the one who sees clearly because they stand apart. While this archetype can lead to valuable insights and contributions, it can also become a prison. The smart kid becomes so identified with being different, with being the one who understands what others don't, that they lose the ability to simply be human alongside other humans. This is where the most dangerous question emerges. What if your intelligence isn't a gift that separates you from others, but a gift that's meant to serve your connections with others? Here's where Jung's concept of the transcendent function becomes crucial. The transcendent function is the ability to hold opposing truths simultaneously, to be both intellectually gifted and emotionally connected, both analytically sharp and socially engaged, both individually unique and collectively belonging. Most smart kids never develop this capacity because they get stuck in either-or thinking. They believe they must choose between being authentic and being connected, between being intelligent and being accepted, between being special and being normal. But Jung's deepest insight was that maturity comes not from choosing sides, but from integrating opposites. The goal isn't to suppress intelligence to fit in or to embrace isolation to remain authentic. The goal is to become a person who can be fully themselves while remaining fully connected to others. This integration requires what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to hold the tension between opposing needs without escaping into one-sided solutions. It means accepting that you can be both intellectually superior in some ways and emotionally immature in others, that you can have profound insights and need basic human connection. The smart kid who becomes a healthy adult learns to use their intelligence in service of connection rather than as a barrier to it. They discover that their gift for understanding can become a gift for helping others feel understood, that their ability to see patterns can help them navigate relationships more skillfully. But this transformation requires facing the most difficult truth of all. The most liberating and terrifying realization is this: your loneliness isn't the price of your intelligence, it's the cost of your incomplete development. Jung observed that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For smart kids, the darkness isn't their intelligence, it's their rejection of their own humanity. The path forward isn't to become less intelligent or to suppress your gifts, it's to integrate your intelligence with your emotional, spiritual, and social development. It's to become as sophisticated about relationships as you are about ideas, as curious about people as you are about concepts. This means developing what Jung called feeling function, the ability to value people and experiences not just for their logical merit, but for their emotional significance. It means learning to care about things that matter to others, not because they're objectively important, but because they're important to people you care about. It means recognizing that small talk isn't meaningless chatter, it's social bonding, that caring about popular culture isn't shallow, it's participating in collective meaning-making, that wanting to fit in isn't selling out, it's acknowledging your fundamental need for belonging. The smart kid who successfully integrates becomes something rare and precious, a bridge between worlds, someone who can translate complex ideas into accessible wisdom, who can use their insights to help others grow rather than to prove their superiority. They become what Jung called individuated, not just intelligent, but whole. The final truth that Jung discovered through decades of clinical work is this: the difference between a lonely smart kid and an integrated adult isn't fate, it's choice. Every day you can choose to use your intelligence as a weapon or as a gift, to build walls or bridges, to judge others for their limitations, or to help them expand their possibilities. You can choose to see your emotional needs as weakness or as the very thing that makes you human, to view your desire for connection as selling out or as the foundation for meaningful contribution. You can choose to remain the brilliant outsider who sees everything but touches nothing, or to become the wise guide who helps others see what you see while remaining connected to the shared human journey. The smart kid in you, the one who felt so alone, so different, so misunderstood, doesn't need to be abandoned or suppressed. They need to be integrated. Their insights are valuable. Their sensitivity is a gift. Their depth is needed in a world that often settles for surface. But they also need to learn what they missed in childhood, that being special doesn't mean being separate, that understanding others doesn't require standing apart from them, that intelligence reaches its highest expression not in isolation, but in service to connection. Jung called this process individuation, becoming the unique person you were meant to be, not just the smart person, not just the successful person, but the whole person who can be fully themselves while remaining fully human. The choice is yours, every single day. Will you remain the lonely smart kid trapped in an adult's body, or will you become the integrated adult who uses their gifts to serve both their own growth and the growth of others? Because in the end, true intelligence isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It's about being wise enough to know that we're all in this together. And that realization, that's when the real wisdom begins.